The recent meeting between Burkina Faso's young revolutionary leader, Ibrahim Traoré, and Russian President Vladimir Putin wasn't just another diplomatic handshake. Behind the official smiles and staged photographs, there were moments that didn't make it to the headlines, moments filled with symbolism, tension, humor, and unexpected gestures that surprised even seasoned political analysts. Ibrahim Traoré, the 36-year-old captain who has become a symbol of anti-imperialist resistance across West Africa, arrived in Russia with a mission to shift Burkina Faso's geopolitical destiny. But what unfolded during his encounter with Vladimir Putin revealed a deeper game at play. One of the most surprising moments happened before the formal discussions even began. As Traoré stepped off the motorcade and walked into the meeting room, Putin personally greeted him with an extended handshake, longer and firmer than usual. For a leader known for controlling every detail, Putin's gesture was a message. Respect. Not just for Traoré as a head of state, but as a defiant figure challenging Western dominance in Africa. Observers noted that Traoré did not bow, smile excessively, or offer typical diplomatic niceties. Instead, he looked Putin in the eye and nodded with composure. This wasn't a meeting of a junior and senior partner. It was a meeting of two leaders who understood the stakes and shared a common adversary. Western neocolonialism. During the closed-door talks, sources reveal that Traoré brought more than words. He presented Putin with a hand-carved wooden staff made by Burkina artisans, symbolizing African sovereignty and resilience. Putin, visibly impressed, reportedly responded with a rare smile and offered a gift in return, a signed vintage Soviet-era map of Africa, a nod to past alliances and future strategies. But one of the most unexpected moments came when translators briefly stepped away during a photo op, and Traoré leaned in and whispered something directly to Putin. What he said remains undisclosed, but a Russian aide later hinted that it involved a direct message about Africa's desire to build a new multipolar order, one free from IMF strings, NATO influence, and the shadow of former colonizers. The body language throughout the meeting was equally telling. While other African leaders have often appeared deferential during visits to Moscow or Beijing, Traoré sat straight, spoke directly, and occasionally gestured with his hands, a cultural sign of authenticity and passion in West African political dialogue. Putin, in turn, listened, not interrupted, and nodded often. Another surprising moment came during a private lunch. While most such meetings involve formal meals with traditional Russian dishes, Traoré was reportedly served a mix of Russian and Burkinabe-inspired cuisine, a move likely arranged at Putin's personal request. Sources suggest that Putin had requested to include dishes like tea and peanut sauce as a sign of cultural respect. And then came the security detail moment that caught many by surprise. After the formal sessions ended, Traoré stepped outside, without the usual heavy presidential shield. Instead, he interacted briefly with a group of Burkina students in Moscow, a spontaneous move not included in the itinerary. This small but powerful gesture reinforced his image as a leader of the people, even on foreign soil. Perhaps the most powerful unseen moment, though, occurred at the end. As Putin and Traoré stood for a final handshake, Putin made a subtle gesture, placing his hand briefly over Traoré's wrist. In Russian diplomatic culture, that gesture means solidarity, not dominance. It was a signal that Russia sees Traoré not just as a strategic partner, but as a potential future leader in the realignment of Africa. The entire visit, filled with symbolism, subtle power dynamics, and mutual respect, marked a turning point. It wasn't just a meeting between two leaders. It was a silent declaration of intent, a message to the world that Africa is no longer willing to play by the old rules, and that leaders like Ibrahim Traoré are prepared to forge new alliances. Even with powers once seen as distant, asterisk may downplay this moment. Mainstream media may skip the symbolism. But for those watching closely, from Ouagadougou to Moscow, the meeting was a sign of shifting tides. What comes next could redefine the balance of power across Africa and beyond. So, if you thought this was just another diplomatic meeting, think again. Asterisk, these were the surprising moments you didn't see. And they matter more than you think. Asterisk, what most people don't know is that behind the closed doors of the Kremlin, during a break in the official agenda, Captain Ibrahim Traoré took a moment that stunned not just Vladimir Putin, but also every Russian and African aide present in the room. Asterisk. It began as a private moment, no cameras, no microphones, just a break in the schedule between sessions. Traoré, known for his bold and unapologetic style, leaned forward across the table and said something that reportedly froze the air in the room. He said, "President Putin, Africa will no longer kneel, not for the West, not for the East. We come not as beggars, but as partners with dignity." Asterisk, there was silence. Then, according to insiders, Putin gave a slow nod, not of agreement, but of acknowledgement. He understood what Traoré was saying. This was not an African leader asking for favors. This was a leader speaking from a place of strength, echoing the spirit of Thomas Sankara, Burkina Faso's legendary revolutionary. Asterisk, what followed was even more surprising. Traoré began listing one by one the ways Africa had been exploited by both Western and Eastern powers. From mineral extraction to debt traps, from arms deals to puppet regimes. He spoke not just for Burkina Faso, but for Mali, Niger, the Congo, and beyond. He said, "We won't trade one master for another. We want cooperation, not domination. Russia must understand this if it wants to be part of Africa's future." Asterisk, Putin, a man rarely challenged to his face, was reportedly taken aback, but not offended. Instead, he smiled, leaned back in his chair, and responded, Asterisk, "That's why you're different, Captain Traoré. And that's why the world is watching you." Asterisk, the room shifted. The tension turned into mutual respect. Russian officials who had entered the meeting expecting to lead the conversation found themselves listening. Traoré wasn't following a script. He was writing a new one, right there in the Kremlin. Asterisk, and then came the unexpected question from Putin. With curiosity, he asked, Asterisk, "What is your vision for Africa in the next 20 years? Without hesitation, Traoré answered, "A continent with its own factories, satellites, militaries, and unity. Not divided by old maps or foreign tongues, but united by dignity, sovereignty, and youth." Asterisk, it wasn't just a political answer. It was a declaration. Asterisk, by the end of the conversation, it was clear that something had changed. This wasn't a transactional visit. This was history in the making, the kind that never gets fully captured on live TV. Asterisk, and as they left the room, an aide whispered to another in Russian, Asterisk, "That young man. He didn't come here to bow. He came here to wake up the world." Asterisk, that, dear viewers, is one of the most powerful and surprising stories you didn't see when Ibrahim Traoré met Vladimir Putin. Not every revolution happens on the battlefield. Some happen in quiet rooms, in moments when the world isn't watching, but should be. Asterisk. Amidst the layers of diplomatic talk and strategic negotiation, one moment during Traoré's visit to Moscow stood out for its sheer humanity, and it wasn't planned. Asterisk, on the second day of his visit, just before a formal dinner at the Kremlin, President Ibrahim Traoré surprised his Russian hosts by bringing with him a small group of Burkina musicians and griots, traditional West African storytellers. This wasn't just entertainment. It was a calculated and symbolic move intended to showcase Africa's soul, not just its politics. As the musicians began to play, the sound of the kora and balafon echoed through the marble halls of the Kremlin. Ancient instruments that have told the stories of African kingdoms long before colonialism. Most in the Russian delegation didn't know how to react at first. But Putin, curious and amused, stood and watched as one of the griots stepped forward and began to recite a poem, translated into French, honoring the resilience of African people and the future of African-Russian friendship. But here's where the story took a surprising twist. Midway through the performance, the griot shifted from French into Moor, one of Burkina Faso's native languages, and suddenly Traore joined him. He stepped up, placed his hand on the griot's shoulder, and began chanting along, delivering a verse that, according to cultural experts later, referenced the spirit of Sankara, the struggle against puppets, and a vision of Africa that writes its own story. The room went silent. Even the Russian president, known for his composed demeanor, appeared visibly moved. After the performance, Putin stood up and clapped, not out of formality, but from genuine admiration. What he said next stunned everyone. "That was the most honest moment I've witnessed in a diplomatic visit." Later, during the toast, Putin reportedly said to Traore, "Your revolution is not just in bullets or speeches. It is in your culture, your pride, your identity. Russia respects that." Traore replied with a calm but powerful phrase, "Before we fight with weapons, we fight with memory." That cultural performance wasn't aired. It wasn't in the press releases. But it planted a seed, a reminder that Africa's power doesn't just lie in its resources or strategic alliances, but in its living heritage, its art, its languages, its unwavering pride. In a world often dominated by cold strategy, numbers, and geopolitics, this small moment of music, poetry, and shared humanity became a hidden highlight of Traore's visit. And for many who heard about it afterward, it became clear. Ibrahim Traore didn't just visit Russia to negotiate deals. He came to declare that Africa's spirit cannot be colonized, not by the gun, not by trade, and not by silence. This, too, is one of those moments you didn't see when Ibrahim Traore met Vladimir Putin, but it may be one of the most important. What many don't know is that during Ibrahim Traore's visit to Moscow, beyond the media coverage and official handshakes, a highly confidential security briefing took place, one that shook both camps and revealed just how deeply the West is entangled in African affairs. Sources close to the matter revealed that after the formal meetings ended on the second day, Traore was invited to a private intelligence debriefing inside a secure wing of the Kremlin. It wasn't part of the publicized agenda. Only a handful of individuals were allowed in, top Russian intelligence officers, a few Burkina military advisors, and the two presidents. Inside that closed room, Putin's intelligence team laid out a detailed dossier complete with satellite images, intercepted communications, and classified Western operations, all showing how certain foreign powers were actively destabilizing Burkina Faso and the Sahel region through covert means. What stunned Traore most wasn't just the depth of the surveillance. It was the names. Western operatives posing as aid workers, private military contractors sowing discord between ethnic communities, sophisticated psychological campaigns launched on social media to turn citizens against nationalist leaders, secret funding flowing into opposition movements disguised as civil society. Traore, who had long suspected such operations, finally had proof. And it wasn't vague. It was precise, real-time intelligence. Asterisk at one point. According to a senior Burkina officer who later leaked the details anonymously, Traore leaned forward and said, asterisk, we always knew they were watching us, but we didn't know they were inside the house. Putin then made a chilling comment. What's happening to you now happened to us for decades. Welcome to the new Cold War. Only now, Africa is the battleground. Asterisk, the security briefing lasted over 2 hours. Maps of West Africa were projected, showing regions where arms were flowing unchecked, where drone surveillance was secretly being conducted by Western forces, and even locations of covert training camps for rebel groups. Asterisk, Traoré remained calm, but his silence spoke volumes. Asterisk, at the end of the session, Putin reportedly offered to strengthen intelligence cooperation, a bold move that would allow Burkina Faso to access tools it had never had before: secure satellite data, counter-propaganda systems, cyber defense mechanisms. The kind of assistance that could level the playing field. Asterisk, Traoré, however, was cautious. He didn't want to swap one surveillance master for another. So, he set a condition, asterisk, if we are to work together on intelligence, Russia must never operate behind our back. Transparency is our red line. To which Putin responded, then we build a partnership, not a shadow empire. Asterisk, the handshake that followed wasn't for the cameras. It wasn't about weapons or oil or contracts. It was an agreement forged in shared distrust of global manipulation and a desire to build a new kind of alliance, one where Africa is not the pawn, but the player. Asterisk, this hidden security briefing was one of the most critical moments of the visit. It didn't make the headlines, but it may have forever changed the way Burkina Faso defends its sovereignty. Asterisk, in a world full of staged diplomacy, this raw, unfiltered exchange revealed the deep, dangerous games being played in the shadows and the determination of leaders like Traoré to expose them. Asterisk, these are the moments you didn't see when Ibrahim Traoré met Vladimir Putin, but their impact may echo far beyond Moscow or Ouagadougou and into the future of a rising Africa. Asterisk.